Good afternoon, and welcome to Making the Case with Dr. Akande. I'm Dr. Yemi Akande, and each week on the program, we'll bring you conversations with established and emerging leaders from a broad range of organizations as they offer their views on pressing local, national, and international issues that impact Northeast Ohio. Welcome to Making the Case with Yemi Akande. My guest today is Tim Mueller. I think Tim has been described as a progressive visionary. I kind of like to think that you're a man on a mission, and I'd like to hear more about that. You've led a number of world-class teams, scientists, and business professionals who are just changing the landscape of their respective communities in a number of different ways. Welcome to my show.
Thanks, Jamie. It's good to be here.
But let's talk about your story. Where did it all start? How did Tim Mueller become the Tim Mueller that we know today?
Well, it sounds kind of odd the way you phrase that, only because it's humbling. But I think one of the things that really kind of made a lasting impression on me is that my parents were divorced when I was 4, and we lived in the old Brooklyn inner city part of Cleveland. And when my dad left, my mom really just kind of said, "Listen, you're the man of the house, and we're going to need to rely on you in the future." Wow. And so I think I grew up pretty quickly in that sense, and really was very proud of her, the way that she worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs for us, was eligible for food stamps but had too much pride to take them. She just wanted to do it on her own. Right. And so I saw that really hard work ethic from her. And I knew from a very early age that I wanted to have my own business. It started off in 7th and 8th grade when I had a paper route. I saved money and bought a 35mm camera.
Oh, wow.
And started shooting photographs of the high school athletes who had pretty big egos. And started selling them photographs. I made enough money to buy a darkroom setup with an enlarger, and then had a couple guys come over and do the processing of film with me. And we made a little bit of a cottage business there for the high schools around the area selling photographs. Ah. And it was kind of the aha moment for me that I was out playing baseball, and 2 of my buddies were in my darkroom making money for me.
Oh, wow.
And at that moment I said, wait a minute, this is pretty cool. And I knew at that point I've always wanted to have my own business. I was fortunate enough to have some Fortune 500 experience, both with BP America and Eaton Corporation here in their corporate staff. And then in 1990 jumped out to co-found the first company called Vantage One Communications. And interesting 10 years of the internet growth. We made some acquisitions in Dallas, started a business in Tucson and Phoenix. And then in 1999, as we were going to really grow nationally, we had a private equity firm kind of make us a deal we couldn't refuse. Wow. And it was about a year and a half before the bubble burst in 2001 of the tech bubble. Right. And so from there, really had an opportunity to go and work with the city of Cleveland, Mary Jane Campbell, who was the first female mayor of our city, 55th mayor.
How did that feel, working with Mayor Campbell?
It was incredible.
Was it historic?
It was, partially because of breaking the glass ceiling for women, which, the reverence I have for my mother and sister is so immeasurable. And then to see Jane take this, and which I thought did a great job, jumping into the city. We talked about me being the first tech czar, and as we spoke more, and she said, I think I'd like you to be one of my chiefs. They've got 5 chiefs that run the city, so I was chief of development and had economic development, housing, city planning, workforce development, and the Office of Equal Opportunity. Wow. And it was a nice sized portfolio for the city, and she opened up opportunities that were just amazing for life experience. But also we worked really, really hard. And, we kicked off the whole East Bank Flats project for Scott Wolstein that's now becoming a reality. Right. We moved in Cisco Foods, which is the largest payroll in 35 years. East 4th Street development was all on our watch. So a lot of it, unfortunately, as kind of a visionary for the mayor and for her staff, we don't always get to cut the ribbons of the projects that you start. Right. But that's part of being kind of a, just someone who has the right intentions of doing the right thing.
So talk a little bit about your transition from government to your reconnection, I'd like to describe it, to your entrepreneurial ventures.
I knew going into it that it would be a short-term commitment in public service, but I really wanted to do that for a while. And after leaving the Campbell administration, I had an opportunity to run a Silicon Valley-based company in Santa Clara, California. And we had invented and patented a technology that basically brings broadband to the basically the underserved and the non-served. So the rural areas and the urban areas that don't always get the kind of infrastructure investment from the telephone companies.
Right.
And this brings high-speed broadband to their homes very inexpensively. And so we built that over 5.5 years, and then just recently sold it to a much bigger company in mid-February.
Wow,
So
congratulations.
now it's reinvention time again.
Right. So tell me a little bit about vision. Do you always have a vision of what's next for you, or do you have an allotted time of, I will spend 5 years on this particular project and then move on to something else? Is there a process? Is there a science to this for you?
You know, that's a really great question, and I really do believe in manifesting and trying to predict what your future might be, anybody's future. And so in this period, and this is the third time that I've had a chance to just stop completely, retool, and then understand what I want to do next. And last time, before going into philology, I literally, with a piece of paper, wrote down worldwide effect, no service product, want to do a product, would love to have touch points to Silicon Valley, and would like to be in technology. And literally something like that came across and said, would you be interested?
Wow.
And so I looked down at the checklist. There were about 10 things, and 8 of them were checked on the list with that one voice. And I looked at my wife, Susie, and I just said, all right, I think this is what I just wrote down. So I believe in putting out those goals. You know, you and I talked a little bit about a 20-year plan that a good friend of mine, Jeannie Coughlin, had come up with, and just encouraged me to look down. And it's basically a piece of paper or an Excel spreadsheet that is 4 blocks across, 5 blocks down. So you basically have 20 blocks in total. And in that, you populate every year for the next 20 years. And in my case, I wrote down my name, my wife's name, and our 3 children's names, and put their ages next to each one in all 20 blocks.
Yes.
And then along the way, I put down basically seminal events that were coming up that what we could see. Our oldest turns to be a teenager. The middle child becomes a college student. Our youngest one graduates from college. My mom turns 85, or whatever those dates are, because you want to look down there and see, gosh, how many blocks do you have left of certain phases of your life? And so we looked down and said, gosh, we've only got 8 phases or 9 phases blocks left with our oldest daughter before she's in college.
Wow.
And it's a wake-up call to say, how do you plan your financial goals, your professional goals, perhaps spiritual goals if those are important to you. And I literally write down where I want to do as far as board service to the community, how many years I might want to be with a certain business venture, what are some of the key things that I want to do, say, with my mom before she passes, you know, major trip or something like that.
Right.
And it basically then outlines those 20 years ahead. And then what I do is I go back to the current year and I create a 1-page plan for that year of all the tactical things that I want to do in that year.
Wow.
Some of it's physical, where I'd like to, you know, run a marathon or do a long bike trip. Some of it is, again, spiritual, where I want to be able to affect certain people's lives or give back. And that part of me then led into really having a more, you know, a more concrete civic vision for myself. And part of that has to do with what I do with board involvement, what I might do with philanthropic donations, what we might do with our children of getting them exposed to the art of giving, which is so important. If you don't expose your young children and they don't grow up saying, well, that's just what you do, then I think you've really missed out on that chance of being a very good tour guide for your children.
That's incredible. As you and I talked about before we started taping, I said I've then gone, as a result of seeing your 20-year plan, gone ahead and created mine. And it was a daunting task. And I was talking to some of my colleagues. I said, you know, you need to create your 20-year plan, and showed them your template. And they said, whoa, okay, this, all of a sudden it just feels so heavy. Where do you think that heaviness comes from for some people?
I think it's hard. It's hard to look at, well, first of all, when you write something down and put a date to it, you know, dreams, I think, you know, are just visions with dates on it. You know, I mean, you got to put a date to it, because I think people hate being called on it that you've gotten through that period and you didn't accomplish what you said you'd do.
Right.
And some of us are list people, some of us are not.
Right.
And it's not right or wrong, it's just different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think sometimes putting things down on paper is really hard. You know, oftentimes when I set a goal, like running a marathon, I try to tell as many people as I can that I'm doing it.
I'm doing that too. So
You know?
I'm running half a marathon, so the whole world pretty much knows.
Yeah. So if you don't do it, you have too many people saying, "How was it?" And you've got to tell every one of them, "I didn't do it."
Do it, right.
You know, and I think some people who want to quit smoking or whatever the advice might be should tell everybody in the world they're going to do it, so they have little mini checks and balances out there.
Right, that's important.
And I think that sometimes that's hard for a lot of people because you have the risk of not succeeding with your goals. And I think that's where the heaviness comes in. But I think you should balance it with lightness. You know, it should be where your vacation is going to be, or what do you do for fun that might be more than just, you know, watching a comedy at night. I mean, it's, so I think you can make it lighter if you choose to, but I think the whole exercise ends up being a little bit heavy for some people.
Yeah, but you just got to do whatever works best for you.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about spirituality, and every now and then on my show I've asked leaders about their spirituality, how it evolved, and how does it help them stay grounded. So Tim, how has your spirituality evolved? Was it something in your background, what your mom instilled in you, or there were mentors along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a lot of discomfort there too for some people to talk about that. And I don't have a problem. We were raised Catholic, and really were, you know, I was one of those kids that I played guitar mass on a Sunday, maybe have served a wedding on the Saturday, and then did a different thing on Friday. So sometimes 3 or 4 times in a weekend to be at our church. And I felt that the community there was really important. For a number of reasons that would be too long in the 27 minutes we have today. I moved away from the Catholic Church, and I feel like, for me, it kind of failed me in what I've really wanted in spirituality. And so my wife and I practice really something that has to be within, and it's really kind of more of like a mirrored thing. If you look in the mirror and look at what you're doing in life.
Right.
And I really believe that it guides me in my decisions. I used to do it with the fear of if I didn't do it, maybe I'd go to hell.
Right.
Maybe bleep that off. But now I do it mostly because it's the right thing to do, and there's a big difference between those two. I don't feel like there's this heavy, view looking down at your eyes, looking down at me, as much as, you know, the reason you're doing is a lot more sincere in how you act and what you do. And so I don't go around thumping the table, you know, or shaking the Bible in front of people's faces, which, again, is fine for some people to do. That's just not what I've chosen to do. And so how we've brought our children along, too, is this deep-rooted belief in spirituality and God and nature and everything that envelops us to become the people who we should be. And again, I don't know if I believe in right and wrong. I think people do what they do. And how it affects others, you can choose in your lifetime to wake up really sad and angry every day,
Right.
versus really positive and happy in how you go across things. And I do believe that the latter attracts more happiness and more positivity to you.
Agreed.
And that all tells me, that all kind of wraps up into what I believe is what spirituality can be defined as. And ultimately, I think it's in your DNA and how you do things.
Absolutely. You know, in life, people go through many experiences that shape them. Let's say you were writing a book. What would be the title of that book based on certain experiences, lessons learned that has shaped you?
You know, that's a good question, and I had never thought of that before. But my first reaction would be the word "be," just "be."
Okay.
You know, because a mentor of mine very early on, and I know we'll talk a little bit about mentors, when I was leaving that job that I had, she wrote down a card and she said, very simply, be who you are and be where you are.
Wow.
And that was it. She said, love, Gene. And
That's profound.
to say be who you are, it's just that you don't need to be a chameleon. You don't need to be just someone who has to fit into every environment. And then be where you are, because if you're always thinking about what's next, and what you could be doing instead of this, then you never fully get the experience of where your feet are planted at that moment.
Right.
So be who you are and be where you are. So the book would be called Be.
I'd buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, since you mentioned it, mentors. Apparently you've had individuals that have impacted your life professionally and personally in tremendous ways. Could you elaborate on who are some of those other mentors and what exactly did they do to help shape you or to guide you or to serve as your tour guide?
Yeah. And it really is tour guide, it's mentor, it's sage, Buddha, whatever you might want to call. But my first mentor was at Standard Oil. His name was Sam Baker, and he made a deal with me early on. I'm 21 years old at the moment, doing my second internship at BP. And he said, "Listen, I'll be your mentor for life. Call me anytime you need me. Do me proud. But the only thing that I require is that when someone else asks you to be a mentor, and if you believe in them and really want to be associated, don't turn them down." Because I believe, and he never really bragged about it, but he probably had dozens of people who he had been mentoring over the years. And it was a big loss when he passed away, because I'd call him up out of the blue and I'd say, "Sam, I know you're going to know the answer in this one. Please walk me through this." And he did. And so as a result, I've been honored to have a number of people who I've been mentoring for some over a decade or longer, who will call once a quarter, once a month, or during really tumultuous times in their life, they might be calling several times a day to get through some issues.
Yeah.
And I always think back at Sam and just say, all right, you've got to be able to pay forward with this.
Indeed.
And so for some reason, and I guess I go back to the spirituality and manifesting it, at the moment that I've needed mentors along the way, they've shown up. And so I think that whole sense of the lesson's always there, you have to be ready to learn.
Right.
I think that the people are always there. It has to be the right timing on when they should be part of your life. And so I could count 5 really, really strong mentors that I've had over my career, and some have overlapped, some continue, but in the moment of the chapter of life that I was in, that mentor seemed to fit beautifully as that round peg in the round hole. And the next one might have been a square peg in the square hole.
Right.
But if you interchanged them at different times, they would not have fit.
Correct.
And so part of it is manifesting the people in your life and listening to your gut. Often people talk about your gut feeling. And I'm a real big fan of the saying that, praying is talking to God, but the gut is God talking to you.
Absolutely.
And you have to just have those big elephant ears to listen to those messages, because I will say that my gut doesn't know everything, but it's rarely wrong.
Right. Yeah. Huh. I think there's an old quote, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That's exactly the quote.
Right.
And I can't believe that it's any more true than the way you've just said it.
Wow. Certainly inspiring life that you've lived. One of the things that you mentioned earlier is involvement in the community. And I know you've served on a number of different boards. And I work with a number of young professionals that are emerging leaders that are always trying to figure out how to balance that. How did you select some of the boards that you're on? I know you're very involved with the Rock Hall. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, Rock Hall for me was really as an offshoot of being so involved in economic development with the city, because I think it's the greatest generator of economic activity for our city. It's a worldwide brand, and it's something that we should build our image more around. It's already there partially, but I think that that's something that everyone around the world has the ability to identify with at this point. So that, to me, it's a no-brainer. The other ones that have helped along the way, I've been involved with Cleveland Scholarship Program, which is college now, because I'm an alumnus, and I also believe that those last dollars, in order to get many children to school, to college, are so important. And so I try to balance between some type of health and human services board and then some kind of arts-related board. Because studies have shown that those who are, whether they're urban, suburban, or exurbia, those who are involved at a young age in arts do better in school, they do better in life as far as succeeding, and they're more well-balanced people. And so to be able to offer that up to more people and to kind of bridge the haves and have-nots with artistic side is really important to me, because I do think it works.
Right.
And, but I don't know as if there's been a time since I've been out of college that I haven't been involved in at least 2 boards, volunteer boards, and with the idea of, being on it for 4, maybe 6 years, and then usually rolling off. Because I think that new blood has always got to be, and I think you always need a new challenge. But I look at it, the balance side that you've asked about is almost like a dishwasher as you're loading it up. Just when you think it's full, you can move a couple glasses and drop another glass in.
Yes.
And for me, I think in my younger life of professional side, I used to pack as much into that dishwasher as I could. And now I really do believe that the dishes get cleaner when you space them out a little bit. And so I have done less of packing it in and more about the quality placement of my life, like a quality placement of a dish.
Right.
And so I've actually pulled back a little bit so that I could do more, if that makes sense. Sometimes you've got to slow down to go faster.
Indeed, indeed.
And so that part of it. But for me, the order of balance that I have is always my spirituality, my family, my work, and myself. And I really think that those are things that you really have to keep as priorities.
Absolutely. So what are you the most proud of?
Being a father. Yeah.
Tell me more about your relationship with your children.
I'll first talk about my relationship with my wife.
That's important, Susie, yes.
I met Susie, and at that moment, literally the moment I met her, I was done. It was one of those things 13 years ago that I met her, and I came home, and I just said, that's the person. And I still feel that way, and I still get goosebumps when I see her and do things together 13 years later.
Was there something specific? She got your jokes? What was it?
I felt like it was an invisible 2x4 that smacked me in the head.
Wow.
And I saw little stars with the birds whistling, above my head.
Yes.
And we just slowly got to know each other, and we were then blessed with 3 children in less than 4 years.
Wow.
And I waited for a while. I was 37 before I got married, so all that time I was preparing to how I would be as a husband first, because without a good marriage, then I don't think parenthood is very effective.
Right.
And I also studied a lot of people to make sure that I knew what to be and not to be as a father. And so there's a really big part of it that whatever I do, I make sure that I consider the effect on my family before I do it. And then I make sure that they recognize and they view my participation in their life as constant and not cyclical.
Right.
I don't want to show up for the play and scramble in and just, I made it. I want to make sure that I'm there helping them with their lines for the play.
Right.
Or teaching them music. And making sure that when they look back, they know that, and Susie, my wife, is just so great at teaching them as well, that they know that they were affected in a positive way. And we always say that we'll succeed if we don't hear them when they're 30 laying on the couch of an analyst saying, and my mother and dad did this or that.
Right.
But if we can, be the good tour guides for them and give them the foundation and teach them a love of learning as opposed to memorizing, teach them the value of arts, teach them the value of giving.
Right.
And I think you've seen throughout this entire conversation that a lot of what I've learned from my professional life and civic vision gets packed into our family life, because it'd be really disingenuous if I lived one life and didn't practice it on the other side.
That's true. I was at the Sculpture Center recently where they had an opening, and there's a group there that said, okay, we're going on to another gallery that's opening, and it happened to be Susie's gallery that they were talking about. So can you talk a little bit about her art? I know she's not here, but as the proud partner, talk a little bit about that.
Well, those who are on the radio can't see it, but we're surrounded by much of this art.
That's
that
incredible.
she uses natural materials, all organic materials. That might be the shavings from a tree.
Mm-hmm.
It might be driftwood that comes off the Lake Erie. It may be petals, whatever it might be, and she creates fine art with this material. And
I thought it was unusual for some reason, but it looks incredibly beautiful.
it is. And I, having been now for 13 years together, she has entered a period of creativity now that I've never witnessed. And the kind of products, so she's gone into home design, interiors, clothing accessories with wood, belts made with great driftwood on the belt buckle, jewelry that goes around women's necks or bracelets. And she recently took out a showroom at the 78th Street Studios in the Gordon Square Arts District. And every third Friday, they have created a wonderful marketplace for artisans, where people come the night of the third Friday, and they go to anywhere of 15 or 18 or so studios and galleries within the building. And I think it's one of the only real marketplaces for artists in this region. And so she's now talking with some fairly big hitters around the country about carrying her work, mass producing some of her other work. And so I'm really proud to be on the sidelines watching her create. And for her, it's a big balance, too, because we've got the 9, 7, and 5-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And so it really is something that we both have to, we often talk about, don't let the music die inside of you. And if she didn't pursue this with such vigor, there'd be a great symphony that never gets heard. And so while it might create a little bit of disorganization at home for both of us, if I'm off doing something and she is, we kind of try to take turns.
Right.
And if this is a period here that you're going to go full bore, then I got to let up a little bit. And then she's done it, and it's worked so far.
It's, what do they say? It's organized chaos.
Yes.
Ah.
Well, there are really only 3 stages in life. It's organization, disorganization, and reorganization.
Absolutely.
And so you might straddle some of those, but you're somewhat in one of those categories for any part of your life.
So is there anything in your life that you could look back on and say, you know what, I'd like to, have a do-over on that? Is there any experience?
Wow. I try not to live with any regrets.
Okay.
And we're all human, and we all do that. And
Correct.
so, there are some people that, have passed through my life where I look back years later and say, gosh, that didn't end exactly the way I'd hoped it would end. Whether it be a relationship, whether it be a business relationship, when you try to do things as ethically as you possibly can, but people get hurt, people have feelings. And I think that I'm the kind of person in life that I hate the idea of people having been hurt by anything that has ever been done. And so I probably have a couple of do-overs there that I would love to have back.
But you're looking forward.
Yeah. But then you make your best to go backwards and say, hey, is it time? Should we just grab a beer together? Whatever it might be. And so those are things that you look back at. But I think in actions and other things, I really don't have any regrets, and I really don't want to live kind of a woulda, coulda, shoulda attitude.
It's not empowering.
No.
Yeah.
And it isn't allowing me to be.
Yes, back to your book. Just be. So is there anything that you would say, I was thinking on my drive here that, I think a great question for you, given your experience, is what would you say are perhaps the 3 to 5 lessons of leadership?
Well, I think some of the lessons in leadership really start with, visioning is one of them, is to have that vision that you're going to try to manifest. I think second of all is fairness, is to walk in other people's shoes as a good leader. I believe in leadership by servitude.
Okay.
So that you become really the lead blocker for your people that you're helping to lead, as opposed to lead from behind.
Right.
So you have to open the doors, be the lead blocker, do the slop work as much as anyone else does, because it matters for people who are looking up to leaders to know that there's nothing beyond your leader that they would do. I think leadership also has to do with setting a tone for the environment, because anyone who studies organizational development understands that if the person is always scattered, doesn't treat people with great respect, that permeates down, and all of a sudden that's the norm and that's the acceptable environment for people. And I think that that's got to be from the top, and always with very meticulous care, is that messaging what you do. And I think leadership, almost above all, is about being a very good communicator. Because, there's often said that expectations unarticulated is disappointment guaranteed. And if you don't give strong expectations of the people that you're working with, then someone, either you or them, are going to look back and say, now that really wasn't what I was thinking.
Right.
But the expectations, if they're articulated really beautifully and continually re-articulated and maybe adjusted along the way, and you get someone sitting there nodding their head north and south like, I'm in, I get it.
Yes.
Then at the end, everyone knows whether or not we have achieved our goals, because everything had been articulated meticulously. And I think that's a real big part of it as well.
What keeps you in Cleveland?
There are two things. One is that our family, our children, are in a better space when they're surrounded by our immediate family. And that immediate family I define as both blood and chosen. So we have blood family that is, my mom, my sister, my father, who we stayed in touch with, my aunt and uncle, our cousins, who during holidays, there's probably nothing finer. And I love hosting everybody at our house. So I'm in my element when you have that chaos and everybody's in the house, everyone's talking over each other and passing food and laughing, and that's what I believe is goodness. But we also have a chosen family that not always is blood family the only element of family of your life.
Right.
And so we have friends who are dear friends that I don't want to be without as my children grow and as I and my wife and I both exist. That's one part of it. And then the second part of it is that there is something beautiful about this city that is an unkept secret, that people who come from faraway lands like you and others. My wife is from Colorado, and she came here for love, and it didn't work out. But she adopted the city and stayed, and then we met years later. And so this city is okay to be smaller than it was 10, 20, 50 years ago. And I think the city is okay that it may not have all the different things that were here 20, 50 years ago. We may have a smaller orchestra someday. We may not be able to support 3 sports teams.
Sure.
We may not have the kind of population in our inner urban core, but we may have more green space because of it.
Right.
We may have more opportunities for young people to come in and make their mark in this city. White, black, Latino, Asian, doesn't matter. It should be something that comes in that is colorblind and vision full. And so that's what jazzes me about this region and this city. And I think that as long as you can feel like you're contributing, one of our leaders in our town, Albert Ratner, was sitting at dinner with his wife and Susie and me, and we looked at him a number of years ago and said, Albert, if you were in our shoes and you have 3 young children, and you see the decline of this and the tough statistics of that and cloudy days and everything else, what would you do? Would you leave or would you stay? And he said, it's real simple. He said, if you don't want to be part of the solution truly and give back and try to make things better, then get out of here right away and go to a nice, vibrant city like Austin or Seattle or San Francisco or Chicago and be part of that. And just be part of something that's already great. If you want to try to help something get better, then stay and work at it. And I walked away, and I wasn't sure how to take it at first, because I just looked at my wife on the way home that night, and I said, did Albert just tell us to leave? And she said, oh, no. He wants you to get even more involved. He wants me to be involved. He wants our family to be involved. And so that, in a nutshell, Yemi, is what keeps us here and keeps us spirited about this region.
That's great. You mentioned dinner. So let's say, it was your final dinner. Who are some of the people that would be at that table?
Well, I would say the typical answer would be, if you can get great figures of our time where you might have Jesus Christ at what end, and you might have someone like Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa and others. And I think at the end, I want the people who I love the most at that dinner, because I want to be able to tell them, how much I appreciated them in my life,
right,
and how influential they were, in shaping me to be who I am and who I always wanted to be. Mm-hmm. I don't know as if I would want to be able to pack it all in and get all the secrets of the universe in that last dinner.
I was wondering about that.
I just would like to say, I was really happy being, and why not have the best people who had been in your life be together during your last meal?
That's an awesome answer. Thank you for that. And my final question to you, Tim, today is 50 somewhat years from now, how would you like to be remembered? What do you perceive as your legacy?
I would say that regardless of how someone might evaluate your life, in the end, my legacy, I think, would be that anything he attempted to do, he tried to make it better from the point that when he came in and left. Mm. And whether or not that is a consensus as to whether or not it was true or not, I just want people as my legacy to know that that was my intent, and I always tried to do it that way, to make things better.
Wow. Again, profound. Well, it looks like that's all the time we have for today on Making the Case with Yemi Akande. I want to thank my guest, Tim Mueller, for joining me today. Thank you for being on my show.
Yemi, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
If you have questions or comments about today's program, please email them to mtc88.7@gmail.com. Making the Case with Dr. Akande is produced with the support of WJCU in University Heights, Ohio. Our theme music is by Alexander May, and our associate producer is Greg Priddy. I'm your host and executive producer, Dr. Yemi Akande, inviting you to tune in next week at the same time for another edition of Making the Case.